Hey traders, this is a follow-up video on how to identify high probability short squeezes with minimal risk and high reward. So if you watched the last video and the last two videos, I mostly focused on volume and the short float. This time I'm going to do the same thing, however I'm going to add in moving averages, which is something I normally do. I didn't do it in the last video because I wanted it to be more visual and try to identify in that way without knowing whether they were above important moving averages. This time I want to really get into the nitty-gritty of the technical side too. So let's go to technical tab. We have the descriptive tab selected. We're going to have to go back to that too. The 50-day simple moving average, let's take a look at that. Let's just say price is above. That's generally speaking, that is bullish if you're above that. Let's go back to descriptive. I have over 20%. We're going to change the volume here. Let's go to over 2 million. Let's see where that brings us. 5 pages. Let's add something else in here. Why don't we also say that we want to be above the 20-day SMA as well? Let's say 10%. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, I like that we're only down to 2 pages now. That's interesting. And here's one we just did in the last video. APT, Alpha Pro Tech. Interesting gap up by big lots. Vite on the breakout. OPK, we talked about that in one of the last videos. Rite Aid, talked about that in the last video. Let's find one we haven't really looked at yet. Let's look at AMRS. Not the highest volume either, but let's go back and look because we're coming up towards this trend line here. Never charted this before. Okay, one interesting thing that I just noticed was the weekly moving average. This is in a horrendous downtrend, obviously, but it looks like it's attempting to make some sort of breakout here. So if we get a close-up here of the 200-week moving average at 527, I think that's an interesting area. If we close the week above that, and then if you get up here, 607 is the high here, who knows what could happen. So I think it's worth setting alerts here, and then for support somewhere down here. So even when we're looking for short-term day trades, it's still really good to know the long-term support and resistance. Even if I don't trade this, I still think it's really interesting to look back at this and see how this analysis plays out. I mean, that goes for any stock, but this chart is really kind of crazy. So I'm really curious what happens with this one. Right now, it's kind of in this pattern here. This is a bull flag pattern, short-term uptrend within a very long-term bearish trend. So as long as we keep closing above the low of this candle, we're in decent shape. Plus, we're above these moving averages here. So watch for resistance up here where my alerts are. And then you could have a little breakout here, but it's, you know, candle by candle. Let's see how this plays out. All right, so we want a bit more of a selection here, so let's change the 20 period. Let's turn that off. We've opened up our options a little bit more here. Let's change our float short back to 25%. And let's take a look at Delphi Technologies. Delphi, a short float of almost 30%. In an uptrend, probably in a long-term downtrend, but short-term uptrend. As you can see, let's take a look at the chart. Okay, so you can see by changing our criteria in Finviz just slightly, it opened us up to some new opportunities that we weren't looking at before, and offered us some pretty bullish charts here. You can really go back to see where the squeeze even began on these. So maybe we're a little bit late to the party, but it's worth watching and seeing if we can get another leg higher in these squeezes. And it's also good to know where you're wrong, which you know, when you have these converging moving averages down here, that's a lot of support, somewhere around $12, and close above this candle high here, $14.95. We should see a challenge up of the high at $16.30 right here. Let's take a look a little further back to see where we might head after that. Wow, like I said, this is a huge downtrend. Let's take a look at the weekly chart. So the weekly chart is looking pretty good here, considering, relatively speaking, you're above these moving averages here. You're above the 50-week moving average, 1280. We got to close above the high of this candle here, 1565, and you can see we have a lot of real estate up ahead. So if this gets out on a nice squeeze and the shorts start to cover, you could see some really nice movement in this stock pretty soon. So that's just another way that you can use Finviz. I mean, there's a million ways you can use Finviz depending on your style of trading. This is just one thing that I do to find high probability trades. There's definitely some other ways that we can identify them that have nothing to do with the float short and short squeezes. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helps you in your trading. And remember, don't let the trade control you. Thanks for watching.